So the Reader's Digest version of the process is essentially this. So the government will advertise their needs, their requirements on a system called SAM.gov. Once you see that advertisement of need, the government is looking for what's called expressions of interest. So that's when the parties who have the space, or they believe they can meet the requirements, they literally just throwing their hat in the ring saying, hey, we think we can work with you. From that point, the government may come out and do some tours. And then once the tours are completed, they'll issue what they call the request for lease proposal. Now, in the private sector, you'll generally hear that referred to as an RFP. This is essentially the RFP, but the government calls it a request for lease proposal. Now, the request for lease proposal is essentially, that's the true start, I guess, of the procurement process, or at least the heavy lifting start of the procurement process. It's also important to know that the RLP will outline what the requirements are. It'll say not only this is what the government needs, but here's how you need to prepare your submittals. Here's the documents you need to be sending in to us. Here's how you need to be structuring the deal. And the RLP will basically be saying, hey, look at the lease, look at all the other documents that we've attached. Use all this information to understand what we're asking you, so that you can respond in the way that we're also telling you we need you to respond. Generally, for the purposes of this conversation, it's an iterative process, meaning there's going to be an initial offer. Then you're going to get a letter called a deficiency letter, where the government tells you, hey, you're missing, you're missing these 30 items. Hopefully not, if you're working with a group that knows what they're doing. But, you're going to get some sort of deficiency letter that says, this is what you're missing, please submit this. Then you go through proposal revision 1, proposal revision 2. That's where you get into that iterative process. And between each of those proposal revisions, you should be receiving a letter from the government saying, this is either what you're missing, so it's a deficiency, or this is what we're not understanding, so that's a clarification. This process can be a month to 2 months if it's done quickly, and that's definitely on the very quick side. And sometimes this process could go 6 months to over a year. So really, it's based on the particulars of the transaction. And I would also say that maybe the capabilities of the people who are, submitting the offers. After the RLP process, you get to lease award. So that's when the lease actually gets executed. The government selects who the winning, offeror is. That offeror now becomes the lessor once the lease is executed. And we were talking about post-award in that previous phase. So that's when we move into the post-award phase. Post-award, you can just think of as that's the tenant improvements, design, construction, acceptance of space. Now that could be a very long time period, but those are the critical things that happen during post-award. It's DIDs, CDs, and then there's pricing negotiations. I think we've already mentioned TICs. So that's the tenant improvement cost summary sheet. There's a lot of jargon and a lot of unique parlance whenever we're talking about, government procurements. There's a lot of words that aren't used in traditional lease transactions, a lot of terminology, a lot of steps to the process that aren't necessarily typical to a typical market transaction. And then once construction is completed and you've obtained substantial completion, you've obtained your certificates of occupancy, that's when the government takes actual beneficial occupancy of the space. And that's when rents start